What's up guys, my name's Curtis and welcome to 5-Minute Finance, where I take personal finance topics and explain them to you in 5 minutes or less. Let's get started. In this video, I'm going to give a brief summary of the personal finance book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. The book is called Rich Dad, Poor Dad because from a young age, Robert was taught about finances from both his dad as well as his friend's dad. His real dad, who he called Poor Dad, had a really good income, but always struggled to pay the bills and get ahead financially. His friend's dad, who he calls Rich Dad, was an entrepreneur who spent his entire life building up businesses and assets. He didn't drive luxury cars or own a big fancy house, but he was extremely wealthy. Robert learned as much as he could from his rich dad and applied it to his life so that he could become wealthy himself. There is a lot of good information in this book that I simply can't put into a 5-minute video, and I highly recommend you guys reading it. So if you're interested, there'll be a link down in the description to the book. There is one main concept that I really wanted to explain to you guys in this video, and stick around till the end and I'll tell you by far my favorite piece of financial advice that I've ever heard that came from this book. In my opinion, the most important concept in this book is the idea of buying assets and not liabilities. In Robert's eyes, if you can master this concept, you will become wealthy. The next few diagrams I'm about to show you illustrate this based on the cash flow of people at different income levels. Now these are oversimplified, but these are the diagrams that Robert uses in the book. To start, here's the diagram that Robert uses to portray the cash flow of the lower class. As you can see, they work a job for income, and then they use every single dollar of that income to pay for expenses, things like transportation, housing, etc. And as you can see, there's no money left over at the end of the month to buy assets, which in Robert's eyes means they'll never get out of the rat race. Now I know certain expenses are unavoidable, and especially at the lower class, they don't have as much expendable income. However, they often spend money on things that they don't truly need, and also they'll often buy liabilities that in their eyes are assets, but they're not. Here's the diagram that he uses to depict the middle class. As you can see, they too work a job for their income. They spend their money on expenses and also what Robert explains as liabilities that the middle class thinks are assets. This includes things like car loans, credit card payments, mortgage payments, and so on. The main problem here though is still they don't have a lot of money left over to put in that asset column, so they're never going to be able to build it up that big. Finally, this is how Robert portrays the cash flow of the wealthy. As you can see in this diagram, income is coming from the asset column, not from a job. Although many wealthy people do work a job, they're often at a point in time where they don't need to work that job anymore because their assets are providing them the amount of income that can cover their expenses. Assets here are things like stocks, bonds, investment real estate, and even information. Now it does show that the rich do still have liabilities. However, their assets far outweigh that, and oftentimes their expenses are just way lower than those in the lower and middle class. The main lesson here is to buy assets and not liabilities. According to Robert, the definition is really simple. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. Cars, unnecessary luxuries that you put on credit, student loans, and even houses, according to Robert, would be considered liabilities because they take money out of your pocket at the end of the month. Things like stocks, bonds, investment property, businesses, and intellectual property are examples of assets, as those are going to put money into your pocket at the end of the month. Although I just broke down kind of one small portion of the book, I really think the entire book can be summed up by this. Everybody should constantly be doing whatever they can to increase their financial intelligence. Also, you should be buying assets and not liabilities so that you can let your money work for you instead of you working for your money. I mentioned earlier that this book gave me by far my favorite piece of financial advice ever. I'm sure all of you guys have at some point in your life said the words, "I can't afford that," or "I'll never be able to afford that." Whether that item you were talking about was a new car, a new house, maybe a boat, or even something like collectibles or expensive clothing. I'm sure you've said those words before. What the book teaches you to do is, instead of saying you can't afford something, ask yourself, how can I afford that? By telling yourself you can't afford something, you've already accepted defeat, and you've come to the conclusion that it's just not possible for you. By asking yourself how you can afford something, your brain is going to try to come up with solutions to the question that you just asked. Instead of completely shutting the door, you not only leave the door wide open, but you give your brain a task to think of solutions to the question you just asked it. So going forward, if you ever catch yourself saying, "I can't afford that," instead ask yourself, how can I afford that? And one day, you probably will be able to. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And if you're new around here and want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. And again, book is linked in the description below. I couldn't even touch the surface of what this book explains, and it's a very good read.